helping people cope with and overcome life's challenges. This is Life Transformations with Michael Hart, certified Christian counselor and director of Ottawa's Elim Counselling Services.
Hi, this is Michael Hart of Elim Counselling Services, and I want to thank you for listening to this episode of the Life Transformation radio broadcast. Today we have another interesting show lined up for you. We'll be doing part 2 of the show Symptoms of a Dysfunctional Family. And last week we started this topic, and we were looking at the story, the family tree of Joseph, and looked at some of the dysfunction that preceded Joseph and how those dysfunction and those influences, negative generational curse or influence as you may call it, played out in his life in between he and his brother. So we're going to continue that show today, and we're going to look at some other symptoms of this family that led to the dysfunction that existed therein. But before I do so, I'd like to remind you of our contact information. Elim can be contacted by phone at 613-699-1677. You can also find out more about us or contact us by accessing the contact information on our website at elimcounselingministry.com. Elim is spelled E-L-I-M, counseling with 2 L's, ministry.com. That's elimcounselingministry.com. If you're not familiar with Elim Counseling, we are a professional organization that offers professional counseling from a Christian perspective. Our counselors are trained psychotherapists who are also believers and who approach counseling from a Christian perspective. God is doing a wonderful work through the ministry here. We see people who are delivered sometimes from 50 years of bondage of things that have happened in their childhood. So you might be going through something and thinking that you have been carrying this for a long time. I would like to let you know that there is hope. You can call us by going to our website or by email, or you can call us at 613-699-1677. With me in studio as usual today is Melissa Wagot. Melissa, welcome, and thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to be here with us again today.
It's a pleasure as always, Michael, to be with you, and I'm really happy that we get to continue the show that we started last week about symptoms of a dysfunctional family. And in that show, we started talking about Joseph's family and how his father's upbringing, his father being Jacob, lended to this whole dysfunctional circus that ended up with Joseph in a pit. But it all started further back, and you alluded to the fact we talked about last week, the negative generational influences, and we also talked about some tragic circumstances that resulted in this family. And for the sake of people who may have missed this show, can you briefly go over some of the things we touched on last week?
Absolutely. We talk of the dynamic that existed in Jacob's household while he was growing up, where there was this division where we had like two teams that were competing against each other. On one side, we had Rebecca and Jacob,
team mom,
and looking out for her son Jacob. And by default, the other team was Isaac and Esau. From the narrative that we talked about last week, we felt that Esau might have been Isaac's favorite son because he was kind of the man's man kind of boy.
And he's firstborn.
Yes, firstborn. He's the athletic type. He's the outdoor kind of guy who, his hair is skin, probably very muscular. And so, there must have been something that was happening in that dynamic that made Rebecca feel, I have to look out for my son Jacob, because moms are protective by nature, and a mom just does not go to this place of, I have to look out for my boy Jacob, unless there were precipitating circumstances there in that family system that made her feel that Jacob was being treated unfairly. So I'm inferring from that there were an unhealthy family dynamic that made Rebecca came to the realization that I have to look out for my son, because if I don't look out for him, he's going to be left out. He's going to be treated unfairly. And this is what we often find. So I think that that family dynamic created a generational curse, where now you fast forward to Jacob as a parent, and we see him continuing the disunity by siding with Joseph, by having this kind of close bond with Joseph, where the brothers are out in the field, but Joseph is with dad. And we see Joseph getting this coat of many colors, but not his brothers. And so I think that kind of division and favoritism is a generational curse that was passed on from Jacob's parent. So I think in every family there is a generational influence that is negative. There are generational curses that have to be broken. And last week we talked about people sometimes can identify the wrong that was done to them, but they can't identify how they might be overcompensating for that wrong by going the opposite way. So Jacob may have felt neglected by his father Isaac, but what happened as we fast forward to the next generation, we saw where he was identifying with Joseph, because maybe there was something about Joseph that reminded him of himself, and he became so protective of Joseph, so enmeshed with Joseph, that he now created a situation where the other brothers felt excluded. Mm-hmm. So we talked about the negative generational influence. We also talk about tragic circumstances, which are often at the root of family dysfunction. Tragic circumstances that have not been dealt with and talked about. And
last week I think you used the term process.
Processed, yes. And process in the sense of talking about the emotions, talking about what happened, not sweeping it under the carpet, but holding it up and saying, this is what happened, and we need to deal with it. But unfortunately, we see that in families when tragedy happens, such as the death of a parent, or, the abuse of someone, the rape of someone in the family, sometimes families go into silent mode. So the tragedy is never talked about, never processed, but it doesn't disappear by sweeping it under the carpet. Children will carry the emotional wound with them into other generations if the tragedy is not processed. So in the story of Joseph, the tragedy was that his mom died when he was a young boy. She died in childbirth, and Jacob was left caring for his boys without the love of a mom. And we talked last week about how this may have precipitated the lack of compassion that these boys had. Maybe they carried a lot of anger because of that. And so they had no compassion on Joseph. Their level of the compassion that they were able to muster is, let him die slowly by roasting in a pit instead of killing him immediately. And last week I talked about the compassion that Esau was able to show because he had Rebekah, his mom, with him all his life, where he was able to have compassion on Jacob when he could have killed him out of anger.
And so that's what we talked about last week. This week, we wanted to get into some other symptoms that you sometimes see when families are exhibiting dysfunctional behavior. And the first one you've put down here for us to discuss is unhealthy attachment.
Absolutely.
And if you can tell us how you see this in this story, but I also really want to know, how do we see it today? Is it something that still exists? Is it something you're experiencing with your clients?
Absolutely. It still exists, and I think when we talk about unhealthy attachment, we can see this in the story of Isaac and Rebekah, where the attachment that Rebekah had to her son Jacob, where she felt that she had to look out for him, she had to deceive her husband into blessing him. I think there is this unhealthy attachment where we find that she became, in essence, closer to Jacob than she were to her husband. And I think that's a tragedy. It's a form of what we call triangulation in counseling terms, where instead of the bond being between the parents as the strongest bond, there is now a bond with a child that forms a triangle in the family system. So now you have in Jacob's family growing up, there was this triangulation between Isaac, Rebecca, and Jacob.
But I think some people, though, would say, well, I'm a mom, or even if it's a triangulation more to a dad relationship, I'm a parent. Mm-hmm. My kids are my priority.
Right.
Aren't I supposed to have a really close relationship with them?
Absolutely. You should have a close relationship with your kids. But what's unhealthy, that's why I use the term unhealthy attachment, because what was unhealthy in this situation, in that they were siding against the other sibling, which was Esau. Esau now became, when you have those unhealthy attachments, children begin to feel like outsiders. So Esau is now feeling like the outsider because mom is obviously closer, to Jacob than she is to Esau. We see the same thing in the families, in Joseph's family, where Joseph is now having this unhealthy attachment with his father Jacob, to the exclusion of his brothers. And we see the animosity that this created, where that led to his brothers trying to kill him. So when there is this unhealthy attachment between a child and a parent, we have a situation where jealousy will ensue, will come as a result of that. We also see where it will lead to children feeling neglected. We also see that oftentimes when there is this unhealthy attachment, parents will tell me that I feel my wife is closer to this child than she is to me, and it's my wife and this child versus me. So the same thing happens today, where sometimes in step family, also I should say even more so in step family, where there can be this, a parent and a child versus the other spouse. And this creates a lot of confusion, a lot of heartache, because the parents just can't develop the bond and the unity that they need to have.
And you can see how this relationship that develops in childhood in this story as well continues into adulthood. And the effects of that are played out with her helping deceive Isaac into thinking Jacob is actually Esau. I'm just thinking, as you see, we're coming off of Thanksgiving, so I'm picturing these relationships around the table that have just occurred. But you can see how that even when you're an adult, those established patterns when you're a kid can play out, where it's you've always favored them, or that kid that gets special treatment per se, potentially as a child, getting it when they're an adult, and how that can put the families in this dysfunctional turmoil of, not them again, mom's bailing them out again, or mom's always been closer to them.
Right. So we can feel Esau's heartache when you realize that he has been deceived, and that his blessing, his birthright, has now gone to his brother. If we look at just a brief passage here, section of chapter 27 in Genesis, and I'll just read it, and it breaks my heart when I read it, because we are told, quote, that Esau pleaded, "Not one blessing left for me? Oh, my father, bless me too." Then Esau broke down and wept. So we have a situation there where Esau is now, because of the deception that his mother and his other brothers has done to him, he's now feeling as if he has lost something, he has lost his blessing, and he's breaking down and he's weeping. And this is what unhealthy attachment creates. The other child feel deceived, the other child feel left out, the other child feel as if they have lost something. And it might not be in a birthright as in biblical times, but it might be a special, a close relationship. It might be a sense of feeling worthy. It might be a sense of feeling that I am loved and I am cared for. And when these things are lost, children actually weep, if not outwardly, they're aching inside.
So how can people work through this? Because as you said, even in the story of Esau, it's so emotionally charged, and you feel his pain and you feel his ache. So whether you're the Jacob in the story or the Esau in the story, maybe the parent in the story, how do you start working through these layers? Because it's so emotionally charged.
Well, I think the first thing that needs to be done, if you realize that there's an unhealthy attachment that is taking place, I think the parents need to be able to sit down and to talk about it. Sometimes these things are so deep rooted that, as in this case that we are looking at, they go back generations. So when Jacob is showing this favoritism to Joseph, he's not even probably aware that he's doing it, and he's not probably aware that he's overcompensating for what happened in his childhood. So sometimes these things are so far-reaching that there is professional help that is needed, that the parent who is realizing that there is this attachment that is not natural between one of the child and the other parent needs to say, we need to go and talk with someone about this, because if it is left to foster, then it's going to create a lot of conflict for generation to come, and it's going to be perpetuated in other generations as well.
And I'm thinking too, those situations where maybe the parents have since passed away, and it's now the siblings living with these scars of being kind of divided. Would you suggest they get help too within each other?
Absolutely, they should get help, because if there is this gaping wound that is obvious there, and there is this situation where people are still hurting because this person was mom's favorite, they need to be able to sit with a professional and to talk this through, because it's often very hard to talk about within the family system, because people are usually so emotionally charged as a result of that. What do you mean I wasn't
the favorite? Yeah. It would be hard to bring it up.
And what's interesting is that a lot of time the person who is the favorite can't see it. I've had this kind of discussion. They can't see it.
Okay.
Right? They will feel that, no, I wasn't the favorite. What do you mean? Yeah. Can't you remember the coat that you got of many colors? Can't you remember that we had to go out in the field and you were always with dad? To them, they're totally oblivious. So Joseph wasn't even aware, that there was something amiss. Like, he was just so happy-go-lucky telling his brothers about his dreams. And so we see that kind of dynamic where it sometimes takes a professional to be able to explore what happened in the past and how the other parties felt and how this might have been unfair. So if you have just joined us and you're wondering what we're talking about, Melissa and I are here, we're talking about symptoms of a dysfunctional family, and we're looking at the family tree of Joseph, and we're talking about the past generations. If you're not familiar with the show, my name is Michael Hart. I'm of Elim Counselling Services, and with me in studio is Melissa Wagat. And our contact information, you can call us by phone at 613-699-1677. You can also find out more about us on our website at elimcounsellingministry.com. Elim is spelled E-L-I-M, counseling with 2 L's, ministry.com. We'll be happy to hear from you, and we would like you to interact with us through our social media by letting us know what you think about this show. And if you have any questions about negative generational influence or generational curse that it is called in some circles, you don't have to always agree with us. We like to have conflict as well. So if you disagree with anything, we'd be happy to hear from you also.
What a perfect segue, Michael, because my next question was going to be about conflict, which I think for many people is sort of the most obvious sign of a dysfunctional family. So how is conflict illustrated here in this story, and what can we learn from it?
So I think when you have a family situation where children begin to feel that they're treated unfairly, where dysfunction is being perpetuated from one generation to the other, then the inevitable result of that is conflict between the people within the family system. So if you look to the story of Esau, we are told in Genesis 27 verse 41 that Esau hated Jacob because he had stolen his blessing, and that he said to himself, my father will soon be dead and gone, then I will kill Jacob. So that's a very, very sad narrative, because what is happening here is that you have this picture of Esau waiting for his father, longing for the day when his father would be dead so that he can kill his brother.
Well, I'm thinking a less extreme circumstance where I hear this sometimes too, where you may not be longing for your parent to die so you can kill your brother, but you're waiting for the day your parent passes so you don't have to deal with that sibling anymore. So you can shut them out, and you don't have to see them at dinner anymore. You can build that wall.
You don't have to see them at Christmas. You don't have to go to your family.
No, because I'm going for mom and dad. But when they're gone, I'm out.
That's a perfect example, Lisa. So it's may not necessarily be as dramatic as wanting to kill them.
Let's hope not.
Although sometimes I hear people say that. I just feel as if I could strangle that person, right? So it might not be that literal, but this wishing not to have anything to do with that person. And if I could just not go to those family dinners, when mom and dad is passed away, then at least I don't have to put up with that. So those are the sad realities that come up, and this sort of conflict is often a sign of the dysfunctional, the symptoms of a dysfunctional family, and the negative generational influence that is at the root of it. But if we go fast forward to the next generation in the book of Genesis, where we see the same kind of conflict, almost of the identical magnitude, being played out now in Jacob's family, between Jacob and his brother, Joseph and his brothers, rather, where Joseph's brother is saying, some of the brothers are saying, let us kill him, and another brother is saying, let us just throw him in the pit so that his blood is not on our hands, so that he will die a slow death in the pit. So these are very, very tragic and graphic situations here, extreme situations, but I think it speaks to the fact that when there is dysfunction within a family, when there are unhealed emotional wounds, when they're such from tragic circumstances, when there are unhealthy attachment which make kids feel that they're being treated less than, when there are negative generational influence, you will have these kind of conflicts that will be happening in the family system.
It's like a maladaptive coping strategy. You almost can't blame them for having not dealt with the things correctly, that they're exhibiting this outward conflict and trying to dealing with the circumstances they're in. What other symptoms do we see in dysfunctional families?
In dysfunctional family, there is often family secrets that are kept from other members of the family. If we go to the previous generation of Isaac and Rebekah, we can identify the family secret there as the secret being between Rebekah and Jacob, where Rebekah and Jacob is plotting. They're coming up with this sinister plot to steal Esau's birthright, to take away.
And it's pretty elaborate, eh?
Yes, very, very elaborate. And so we have this very, very sad situation where Isaac's health is failing, he can't see, and you have Rebekah and Jacob plotting to deceive him to think that, Jacob is Esau, so that when he blesses Jacob, believing it is Esau, then the blessing will go to Jacob instead of to Esau. And so that secret there is very typical in family. If we go to the next generation, where we have Jacob and his sons, we see also that there is family secrets there, where the brothers all know that they hate Joseph and they're planning to kill Joseph. And apparently this plan must have been going on for some time, because when they say let us kill him, it wasn't like, oh, you mean we should kill him? This doesn't seem right. It seemed as if they were all on board right away that they should do something to him. So apparently the brothers all know this hatred and anger for their brother, and the dad had no idea that this was going on, but the brothers knew that there's this ugly thing that has happened. After the act where they deceived their father into thinking that that Joseph was dead, we see that the brothers carried this secret for many, many years, with their brother thinking that Joseph was dead while Joseph was, in in Egypt. So we see that the parallels in this story are very, 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 very striking, because you have them dipping an animal's skin in blood, and dipping his coat in blood and taking it to his father to say, see, he is dead. Where we see in the previous generation, we see Rebecca doing the same thing, putting animal skin on Jacob to make him appear to be hairy skin, so that Isaac would think it is his brother. So the deception and the secrecy is very, very, example is very, very striking. So secrecy in today's family take the place of incest, that people know in the family system that is going on, but nobody wants to talk about it. People have been abused, but they're carrying that secret for years and not saying anything to other family members. So it's usually a symptom of dysfunctional family, that you have these huge situations that are taking place, like the elephant in the room, that sometimes mom know that their daughters are being molested. Like one client said to me a few years ago that mom had to know that I was being molested because my room was right next to her, and she could actually see in my room from where she was. So she must have known that dad was in my bed and what was happening, but she just didn't say anything. So sometimes these secrets are secrets that people don't want to acknowledge, because if they are to acknowledge them, then it means big consequences. But one final thing, and I have to wrap up shortly, but one final thing that we see in this story, in the narrative, is the apparent silence of God in the two generations.
And how is it exhibited here?
Because in the story of Jacob, for example, we see the brothers planning to kill Joseph. We are told that Joseph had this dream, but nowhere are we told that God intervened. God didn't intervene to reveal to Jacob that his sons were having this sinister plot to kill one of their siblings. We didn't hear God intervening in the pit by, coming alongside Joseph or speaking to his brothers not to do this terrible thing. There is a total absence, apparent, I should say, silence of God in this story. And this is how people feel when they're going through this in dysfunctional family. They will say, where is God? Mm-hmm. Where is God in this family system? But I think if we look at the story in hindsight, we can see that God was there all the time. Even though it wasn't apparent to the parties involved, God was there all the time. We see how it turned out with Joseph. We see how it turned out with Jacob. So my word of encouragement to you today, if you're listening to this show, is that even with what you have been through, maybe it has been abuse, maybe it has been tragic circumstances, and you're wondering, where was God? I want to say to you that God is there, and He's working through your circumstances to bring about His glory and your good. So we have come to the end of today's show. I want to thank you very much for listening to this edition of the Life Transformation Radio Show. You can call us at 613-699-1677. Melissa, thank you very much for being with us on the show today.
You're very welcome.
Until next time, this is your host, Michael Hart of Elim Counselling Services, praying that God would bless you in all your relationships and to keep you sound in mind and pure in heart.